it gets my readers to understand like the whole of who I am. Maybe they're Armenian and they love that part of me, or, maybe they work in tech and they love that part of me, or I like to stress bake when I on the weekends, maybe they love that part of me. And so like all of these things kind of coalesce, and it's like the parasocial relationships we build with our audiences, the more they know about you and the more they feel like you're a multifaceted person, the more they're going to be able to connect with.
I'm excited to be speaking with Alyssa Jarrett, a romance author and content marketer based in the San Francisco Bay Area, where the only thing funnier than working in tech is writing about it. She's currently writing and self-publishing a 5-book series of Silicon Valley rom-coms. Her latest novel, book 3 in the series, is an Armenian bakery romance titled LOVE and PAKLAVA. As a content marketer, she worked for a decade in B2B marketing roles for tech companies, including Rockerbox, Iterable, and Ripple. Alyssa holds a BA in literature from UC Santa Cruz and an MA in mass communication and journalism from Fresno State. Alyssa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited too. Let's go back to, way back to childhood. Tell me a little bit about what you loved doing and how do you see that showing up in your life today?
I've realized I've been obsessed with love my entire life. I have gotten my early start. I remember some of my earliest memories as a kid were going to my mother's esthetician's house. She actually went to someone's house who had like a nail studio, and there would be a TV playing soap operas in the background. And so I would just be, a little bored trying to entertain myself. And I would watch The Bold and the Beautiful with my mom and her esthetician. And I would get caught up in the storylines just like they would. And so that sort of led to, taking my mom's soap opera digests to like flip through the pages and like find out who like made love that week. And, taking her Red Book magazines for the sex tips. And so it was always something that was really top of mind. And now that I'm kind of coming to it as a romance author, I know there's a lot of pearl clutching about, having children be sort of exposed to more romantic or even more adult content. And I have to say that like these are very natural things for like kids to want to be curious about. And honestly, like, I think if everyone could just loosen up a bit on this whole topic, we probably have a lot healthier relationships and the healthier sex lives. And so I really appreciate that I didn't have that kind of stigma growing up, because now I get to write about love all day.
You took a hard pivot when becoming an author. You spent a decade doing B2B content marketing and rising up the ranks to a VP of marketing role. And then you quit your job and jumped in headfirst as a romance writer. What would you like to share with our listeners about this transition?
Oh my goodness. It's going to sound on paper like it was all part of this grand plan and vision. And it definitely didn't feel like that in the moment. I was really careening into a ditch with my mental health. And to me, this felt like a survival mechanism that I couldn't go, one more minute working 12-hour days, under a very high pressure situation, being the sole marketer on a team, trying to build up a very early stage startup. It was just a lot. And I was crumbling under that pressure. And so I really, talked to my therapist, talked to my husband, talked to my friends, and they all just said, like, if you're not happy and it's not going to financially decimate you to take some time off, like, what is stopping you? And so I realized that I needed to sort of level set with myself. And when I quit, it was in the new year of 2022. And I just thought of it as a sabbatical. That's a very common concept in tech, right? You pay your dues and you take a little bit of time off. And so originally I thought of it like I was just going to take that year as a sabbatical. And I was going to work on the series that I'm publishing now. But eventually after, I spent the first month just sitting on my couch, rewatching Gossip Girl, like trying to like recover from burnout, I realized that this path could be a lot more fulfilling if I had transitioned it into self-employment. So I was lucky enough to have a really great network, and I had people coming out of the woodwork to want to do content marketing with me. And so I built up a small clientele, and that sort of led me here. So I'm able to balance freelancing in the tech industry and also write my novels. And I highly recommend that if you have the capacity to, if you have the financial means to, if it's something that you've always wanted to do. I'm a person with a diagnosed anxiety disorder. And if I can, rip the Band-Aid off and like make that leap, anybody can.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And beyond being a writer of your books, you are also self-publishing. So you decided to make the switch from querying to actually self-publishing, and quite successfully. What did that shift look like, and how have you found success as a self-published author?
Yeah, I pride myself on knowing a lot about the publishing industry. I had queried 3 of the 4 manuscripts that I had drafted at the time, and over the course of 3 years. And it was so beneficial to go through that journey. I highly recommend that if you're interested in traditional publishing, there's no harm in giving it a shot. It was good for me on my journey to stop viewing agents and editors and publishers as authority figures, and start viewing them as business partners. And so I think when you're first starting to query, you're just so desperate for validation that you just want everybody to like you, and you're willing to do anything. And then the rejections start rolling in, and you start having an existential crisis about, am I even set up for this? Am I good at this? And eventually, at least I hit a point where I was, in a revise and resubmit with my, with one of my manuscripts that ended up becoming my debut novel. I spent 6 months revising that manuscript with an agent that I really respected. And it was around the new year last year that I had gotten the very sweet rejection of, wow, this is a massive improvement. I just found myself making notes on your voice, and that wasn't fair to you. And I don't think I'm necessarily the best fit long term. And so that felt like she was setting me free. And I knew that I had the chops to do this. I knew that my prose was of publishable quality. I had gotten the validation, quote unquote, that I needed from the query trenches. And more importantly, I had built up that confidence while querying to say, I can do this myself, right? I may not necessarily have the distribution and reach that trad writers do. But what I do have that a lot of writers don't have is I have a very extensive marketing background. I have a huge amount of drive. I have, been building content online for over a decade. And I'm also financially in a place where this is this is in reach for me. Because it's, you have to start treating yourself like a small business. And I really appreciated having that mindset. And so now I love it. I love being in control of the entire creative process. I'm fortunate enough to have very talented people in my village. My brother is a professional graphic designer, and he does my covers. And so I have the right people around me, and it's just a whole lot of fun, honestly. To me, that's the most successful part is like, are you proud of the products that you create? And do you feel in control of the process? Sink or swim. And I can definitely say that.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your most recent novel, Love and Paklava. A lot of the book reads like a love letter to Fresno, in particular the tight-knit Armenian community there. And I noticed in your previous book, Love on the Rocks, a lot of that book read like a love letter to climbing and Yosemite. And sometimes romance can get a bad rap for being too fluffy, but it seems like you aim to shine a light on things that you care a lot about and are rather serious topics. I mean, the Armenian genocide comes up. Extreme sports is typically not seen as fluffy. How do you think about combining this genre of rom-com with more serious topics?
I have always loved satire. It is something like everything is what I would call make funnable. There's anything serious. If you are coming from a good place and you're punching up rather than down, and you're part of that community that you're poking fun at, like I think that makes everything so much more resonant to people. And so originally in my debut novel, right, I worked in tech. I knew that world very well. It's rife for satire. Obviously, so many media have already done it before. But then I started to realize there's so many other lenses that overlap in this Venn diagram, right? Like the amount of people who work in tech and do rock climbing, it's a circle.
It is.
And that was one of the things that I connected with on my husband, because he was the one that introduced me to going to climbing gyms. And I saw tons of people on dates or in relationships going climbing. And so romance and climbing obviously had an angle. My local gym hosts like speed dating events. It's something that's definitely part of the community. And so now with Love and Paklava, as someone who is a quarter Armenian and wanted to talk about, growing up in Fresno in the Armenian community, again, there's a lot of things that a lot of people don't know about, but when you start to pull back the layers, it has so much richness from like a romantic genre lens. And so for me, as someone who has always felt like the Armenian genocide has defined our community and our culture, how can we educate? How can we advocate for those who may not be familiar? But also, how can we talk about it in the context of today? And learn from past atrocities as we can see sort of the landscape as it stands now, right? And I'm not a historian, right? I'm not an activist in that regard, but I do know that part of the reason why people flock to romance is they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel like someone understands them. And those are the stories that I set out to tell is, if you can feel like this is exactly the experience that you experience, then I've done my job right. And my favorite compliment is when people who work in tech or, are part of these communities that I address, they say, oh my God, you got it, like 100%. Like it's exactly like that.
I'm actually realizing now in the moment, Tori, the protagonist in Love and Paklava, and then Tanya in Love on the Rocks, they're both like newbies to this world. So you kind of bring us in through them to rock climbing, to the Armenian community. And I think it's a way to kind of shepherd the reader as a potential newbie to that as well.
Yeah. It also helps when you write a sports romance, I'm not setting out to position myself as an expert of said sport. So I'm learning along with the reader. And I think that gives a nice vantage point into this. So I don't ever want to speak for someone's lived experiences. For example, my debut novel, Love Actually, is an interracial relationship with a Chinese American male protagonist. And I chose to write in single POV because it's not my story to tell about what it's like to live as a Chinese American man. But he gets to educate Casey, who is a Southerner transplant to the Bay Area. He gets to educate her about the Chinese community in the Bay Area and why there is no Chinatown in San Jose versus in San Francisco. And so we have those moments where, sometimes my white characters are going to put their foot in their mouths, and it's a learning experience for everybody involved, because I always think that we all have something to learn from the communities that we're participating in.
Let's take a moment to reflect on this question. What have you learned from a community that you joined? Outside of hosting this podcast, I partner with leaders in the workplace to turn professional challenges into leadership successes and career progression. I love working with executive leaders, people managers, and of course, ampersands. If any of this sounds interesting to you, reach out to me at jessicawan.com. That's JESSICAWAN. Now, back to the show. I have to say, you really put both the rom and the com in rom-com. I was laughing out loud at many points in your books.
Thank you.
You capture the essence of kind of being a millennial in the 2020s. You have these cultural references, tech memes. I particularly liked the list of Google searches that you sometimes put at the end of your chapters that just shows where the character's mind is kind of devolving to. What do you hope that your readers take away from your books?
I mean, I love mixed media, right? I have a background in journalism, and I also have a background in PR. And so my whole work experience has been press releases and newspaper articles and podcast transcripts, and ads. And so I consider myself to be a content marketer. And there's so many types of content that evolve around that. And I think a lot of people, they don't recognize the type of world building that does happen in contemporary romance, right? Like, my books aren't coming with a fantasy map, but that doesn't mean that they're not positioned very strongly in a time and place. And so for me, I really appreciate when someone captures that essence really well and uses media to enhance what the characters may not be like firsthand experiencing. And so, it's a really great way to dig into the psyches of both the characters and the surrounding world. And also, as someone who has very big anxiety spirals, like something like a Google search, like rabbit hole, is a really great way to understand how someone's thinking about a topic. And so it's really great. I love writing those. It was so funny because it's one of those things when I was careering in traditional publishing, there were many agents and professionals that did not quite get what I was going for. And if you're not a lover of mixed media, you may find them, superfluous. But the people who do get it, who are entrenched in these communities, again, it's just like extra validation that I see them. I know exactly what they're talking about and what they're experiencing.
Yeah. It helps you find your readers and find your people, I think. You have named several ways in which your background in content marketing and in the tech world have found their way into your job as a writer and a self-published author. You had lots of memorable moments as a tech marketer. You mentioned getting a standing ovation from the entire company after rolling out new messaging, being recognized as one of the best people managers in the company. How else do you think the skills that you have developed in your time in the tech world have helped you as an author?
Yeah, I think it's interesting when I look back on, being in-house, being a manager of people and running marketing teams. I'm sure a lot of the things that made me a good manager or made me a good writer have similar themes. And what I mean by that is that I'm always going to have empathy for the people that I interact with. I'm always going to be putting my team first. I am also a progressive leftist, and so I have a very visceral reaction to authority and institutions that I feel like are exploiting people. And of course, tech was very rife with that. And so I wanted to be as authentic, as grounded as I possibly could be, that even if I didn't agree with a policy, that I wanted to advocate for my team, that I would fall on the sword if necessary. And I wanted to create copy that didn't sound like AI generated slop, right? I wanted to actually have that emotional pull. And so all of that has fed the writing, right? I think so many people, especially content creators, we can get caught up in this rat race of trying to monetize our hobbies, trying to exploit our audiences, and we forgot how to be a person, like just a human online. And and so, my feeds aren't going to be the most aesthetic, right? I am not ever going to be like super great at TikTok, but like I can take my strengths and I can speak to people as if they're real friends of mine and get them invested in the stories I tell. It's not going to be a rapid success, it's not going to be an overnight success, but I want my connections to people to feel genuine, regardless of whatever environment that I'm in. Because I feel like that's just going to make things so much more rewarding for everybody involved.
Yeah, it's a lot about authenticity. And something that you chose to do that is actually pretty unconventional is you write your romance novels under your real name. A lot of romance authors use a pen name. How did you come to this decision, and what has come of it so far?
It's funny. I will say that I probably came to this conclusion because I have a background in journalism, right? Like I was never raised that I was going to write any bylines under anything other than my own name. Like that was the default position. And so I learned really quickly that I don't want to put anything online that I wouldn't say to someone's face, that I wouldn't be able to stand by. And I got my start blogging very early. I had a book blog when I got my first entry-level marketing job, and my boss at the time loved the way I wrote. And I was pulling no punches then. Like I said, I hate Nicholas Sparks as a human being then, and I would say it now. So that when I started to talk about my path to publication for romance, I was getting people coming up to me asking what my pen name was going to be. And I did not like the assumption that I should have one. Not that I have anything against pen names, by all means. There's a lot of reasons why people have them. But the fact that it's romance specifically is expected to have them because we're talking about often sexually explicit content, I disregard that entire premise. I believe that the more you take your work seriously, the more other people will take it seriously. And I am not ashamed by what I write. I don't care what people think about spicy content. And I'm also in a position of privilege that I can say that, right? Like I'm child-free by choice. I don't have to protect minors. I'm not in a highly regulated job like in government or finance. I'm self-employed. I don't have a weird boss like getting up in my business. And everyone in my life is supportive of it. And so for me, I wanted to be on the front lines with my name because I see people that I admire, journalists that are talking about abortion rights and police brutality and all of these very controversial topics, risking getting doxxed, getting swatted, right? Putting their livelihoods and literal lives on the line with their real names. And I'm writing rom-coms. Like it's not that serious. So if I can't do this and like put on a brave face, we have no hope for anybody else. And so for me, it did feel, it felt natural at first, and now it feels political, where I think that romance is the most lucrative genre and the most stigmatized for a reason, and it won't ever change unless we defend it.
It's really an act of standing with the other writers who use their real names. Yeah, thank you for sharing. What advice do you have for people who are thinking of becoming an author, and particularly a self-published author?
I think you got to get real comfy on your why, because there are going to be so many things that are going to be clouding your judgment and getting you to think about something in a certain way. Capitalism has this way of like crushing us all. And so you have to be able to say, like, even if no one reads it, even if no one buys it, like, is this what you love to do? And would you do it anyway? Because you can't control so much of this process. I cannot control, how my books are received or how much they sell. But what I can control is putting out a high quality product that I stand by, that I believe in, connecting with readers in a way that feels authentic to my brand and like my platform, and trying to have as much fun with it as possible. Right. When I start stressing about like how many Instagram followers I have, like I have lost the plot. So
Yep.
I have to like pull back, and it's hard as a marketer because I can get in the weeds. But I'm working on an essay right now that's called like, if I have to market my book like a bot, I don't want to do it. And I just have to constantly remind myself, like, this is supposed to be fun. Like, writing books is a blast. I love it. And if it doesn't feel like that, then how can we get it to feel like that again?
Tell us a little bit about how your days look doing content marketing as a freelancer, and also working on novels, which is a lot of world building and can be very all-consuming.
Yeah, I think the hardest part when I was in-house was, again, just having that brain space to like noodle on things, like just constantly having the story in my brain, like top of mind. So now, again, I'm so grateful that I get to have that brain space. Right now I take on, select technology clients. And I always say that I'm not going to be your standard copywriter, right? You're basically entering a partnership with like a executive level marketer, and like my rates reflect that. And so that affords me the ability to like work with brands that I believe in, and that like I appreciate the work they're doing. And they're usually closely related to like my network. So I usually have like anywhere between 3 and 5 clients at any given time. And I like to sort of dedicate like a single day to a single client, and like really just, like I'm not good at multitasking. So just like getting that deep work on one thing, do that one thing really well. And then that usually saves up a good portion of my week for the actual books. And it depending on the stage that I'm in. Like right now, I am in like knee deep in book promo, and so I am focused a lot on like marketing and PR efforts. But I also want to write a holiday novella for the fall, and so I'm starting to get that planned and planning what my drafting looks like, for the next couple of months. And so that's another thing about being an indie author that I love is like my timeline is mine, right? I don't have like a pressure of a publisher like breathing down my neck. Like I get to take my time, or I can rush, right? Like, so many authors are indie because they write at such a fast clip that publishers can't keep up with them, right? And that's the way they make their living. And so I just love the flexibility that affords me, that I can go at my own pace, and I can puppet master this whole experience to something that, again, is fun and enjoyable, and doesn't have to stress me out. Because one thing my editor said when I quit my job was like, if your books start being like a bad boss, like you've gone wrong. So like, don't turn your writing into another toxic work environment you just escaped from. And if it is starting to feel like that, then pull back, take a break, take a rest, like maybe think about like how to slow down. Cause I would quality over quantity. Like I would rather like do things well than try to feel like rushed and stressed through this whole process.
So many nuggets of wisdom in this. Through these interviews, we're co-creating the Ampersand Manifesto, principles for how to lead a multi-passionate life. What are some of the principles that you live by?
I believe, and this goes back to my philosophy on using my real name, is I believe in what I call creative integration over compartmentalization. And so what do I mean by that? So compartmentalization, at least when it comes to being an author, is I want to keep my writing away from everything else in my life. I don't want my family to know I write. I don't want my job to know I write. I'm going to use a pen name. I'm going to use an avatar. Like, it's going to be in this black hole, and like, my whole life is separate, right? It's like a persona I put on. And that works for some people. And sometimes that is a necessity, right? Especially if you're in a country where like the stuff you write about is considered blasphemous. Like, I totally get it. Like, sometimes you just have to live that way. But I have always felt more fulfilled by integrating all aspects of my personality. So my writing, my day job, quote unquote, like my hobbies, my passions, like that's all one big like melting pot. And I feel like that is just so much more natural for me. It's easier for me to market. It's very simplified and efficient, right? Because I don't have to have all these different business properties pretending to be different people. But also, like, it gets my readers to understand like the whole of who I am. And sometimes they're gonna, maybe they're Armenian and they love that part of me, or, maybe they work in tech and they love that part of me, or I like to stress bake when I on the weekends. Maybe they love that part of me. And so like all of these things kind of coalesce, and it's like the parasocial relationships we build with our audiences, the more they know about you and the more they feel like you're a multifaceted person, the more they're going to be able to connect with. And so I never run out of things to talk about. I'm always sharing photos of my cats. Like, I don't have to like structure myself in such a way that I can't just show up as me. And that, I think, to me, that's what like the Ampersand manifesto means to me. It's like, I'm all of these, and how can I share that?
I love this. Alyssa, it has been delightful and refreshing talking with you. Folks, you can learn more about Alyssa on her Instagram at author Alyssa Jarrett, and subscribe to her newsletter, Grumpy Plus Sunshine, on Substack. You can also find books 1 to 3 of the Glam Fam series wherever you buy your books. We will include links in our show notes. I had a chance to listen back on my interview with Alyssa, and I wanted to share a few key takeaways. 1. Confidence and authenticity shined bright through this interview, and I'm inspired by how Alyssa chooses to show up in this world. I love the story of going from what she calls the querying trenches to becoming a self-published author. It wasn't as much that she chose one path or another, as she used querying as a pathway to build up her confidence. 2. Defining success has come up time and again on this show. I really liked Alyssa's key questions around this. Are you proud of your work? Do you feel in control of the process? And if no one buys it, would you do it anyway? 3. Her theme of creative integration versus compartmentalization is so relevant for ampersands. For me personally, it's been a journey. I haven't always showed up fully as a singer, particularly in business settings. You know what? I used to even call myself a semi-professional singer, which downplayed my achievements and how important music is to me. Over time, I've grown. I'm a singer, and more. And I now feel more creatively integrated than ever before. If you liked this show, share it with your friends and fellow ampersands, and make sure to hit the follow button to be notified when new episodes drop. It would mean the world to us if you took 2 minutes to rate and review the show. Just go to the main show page on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and look for the stars.